We're here to help you to be a great student. You probably speak English since you're watching the video in English. But do you want to be a monolingual all your life, or do you have to be bilingual, or trilingual, or even quadrilingual? I love learning new languages. It opens so much of the world to me. I speak English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian, so I have some experience that I can share with you. How do you feel at speaking another language? If you chose a second language is brand new to you, your first step to be just recognize it. First, what does the written language look like? Let's pull up the page in Wikipedia. We have the knife feature where you can look at the subject in many different languages. What do you notice? Does it use the same alphabet as English? Can you tell the difference between the latest languages like French and Italian? Observe the different use of accent or special characters. Now, this next part is harder. What does this language sound like? International cinema is a great way to be exposed to new language in real situations. You may find that initially it just sounds like an intelligible bird, but eventually you recognize where sentences end, and then you can start to pick out individual words. You're training your ear to know what to expect in the new language. You might feel most comfortable learning from the textbook, and that's perfectly fine. You do feel a sense of satisfaction each time you finish a chapter. How do you pick a textbook? You can always go online and see what textbook they are using at school you admire. Ask advice from friends who have studied the languages before. They might even loan you some book. If you do get a textbook, try to find one that has extra material like audio recordings. The more ways you expose to the language, the better. But what's even more effective is making your own study materials. We recommend situational learning. Think about the situations you find yourself in and what you like to be able to say and understand in the new language. It adds a touch of personal motivation to be able to handle yourself in public. For instance, you visit Barcelona and you really want some hot chocolate and churros. How do you ask for help picking a cafe, finding it on a map, catching a tram, ordering and paying when you are finished? This is a very specific scenario with typical sentences that use specialized vocabulary. I doubt you are going to find this chapter in textbook, but it's important to you that to be handled with situation in the language start here. Prepare for your scenario, referring to textbook or phrasebook, or even better, with the help of native speaker, write out the dialogue and a list of vocabulary. Practice with a friend, and of course, don't forget the power of flashcards. Having the confidence to be able to handle yourself in one scenario lets you move on to another and another and another. This scenario will give you an anchor to wrap onto when you are in a new situation. Now that you know how to buy a ticket for the tram, it will be much easier when you have to buy a ticket for the bus or train. If you know how to order in a cafe, it will be easier for you to learn how to buy things in the department store. This scenario ties into many others. To make your language learning really robust, along with learning scenario, you should also learn the basic rules of grammar. This will come more easily to you when you have a set of 20-50 sentences you're already very familiar with. Notice how sentences construction in a new language differ from English. Are the words in the same order? Adjective, noun, verb, adverb? Or are they inverted compared with what you're familiar with? Does it go noun, adjective, You can fall back on those sentences you already know very well from the scenario, and those will help you make sense of grammar rules. In this way, with focused study, you can learn a lot of course, there are really no substitutes for immersion, listening and speaking the language in native speed with no English interruptions. For many years, depending on where you live, it was very hard to do this. Imagine trying to learn Spanish in, say, Minnesota or Stockholm. You have to look really hard to find someone to talk with. I actually moved to Italy and became fluent in Italian. Now, thankfully, you can do immersion online. You can join classes and talk to native speakers all without leaving your house. We recently learned about Lingoda, an online language learning service, and we thought we give it a try. Lingoda lets you work with a group class or individual tutors who are native speakers. Group classes are a little less expensive and may be a good way to easier new language, as well as gives you a chance to meet other people you could practice with. You start at Lingoda with an assessment test to place you at the right level of instruction, and then you progress the old speed, taking classes on the old schedule. You can start as an absolute beginner and work your way up to fluency. You can even get certification that can help you with job. Now let me share with you some tips and tricks I learned through study languages. Tips number 1. Work very hard on your pronunciation. Pronunciation first. Start by imitating what language sounds like when you watch a foreign film. You might feel silly, but you have to master the sound of the new language. It may help to know there are a finite number of sounds you need to make. For instance, the French phonetic alphabet contains 37 sounds. You can probably pronounce most of them just fine with practice. Usually, people have trouble with just one or two of the sounds. For instance, the French R is nothing like the English R. You have to tone your tongue completely differently. So when you see R written down, it can be confusing. Many beginning students pronounce it incorrectly, and then they have to break that habit. So it's better if you start pronouncing things properly as soon as possible. It can help to imitate the way French persons speak English. This is not to be rude or mean or anything like that. So doing this to learn how to they make natural French sounds. Saying the Z lets you understand that TS is not pronounced the same way in French as in English. Tip number 2. Grammar is easier to learn if you understand the grammar of the old language. So check out our English grammar series. The more languages you learn, you start to notice things that they all have in common. All languages have a way to express an action, a verb. You can say whether something is happening now, or in the future, or in the past. All languages have a way of identifying the subject, who or what is doing the action. Next comes replace that subject with a pronouns. Luke went to the store. He went to the store. Soon you'll figure out that there isn't that much grammar to learn, and you can pick up a lot of it by practicing properly construction sentences like with the scenario we talked about before. Another thing you get more relaxed about once you learn more than one language is numbers. Each language has its own number system. Some will feel more comfortable for you because it's similar to your native language. Others, where you learn how to count by 20 and subtract 10 or whatever, you can do it. Tip 3. Build your vocabulary. This is the biggest. This is the part of learning languages that will take you to the longest. In fact, you might never be finished building your vocabulary. The trick is know where to start. It turns out the great majority of the time use very small number words. Linguists had analyzed the word frequency in Cyrillic, French, or the major language. By learning the 100 most common words, you are able to understand about 50% of the language. That's an incredible head start. Learn the 500 most common words, and now you understand 67%. 1,000 words gets you to the 75%. By a first frequency dictionary, you commit yourself to learning first the 100 most common word, then the 500 most common word, then the 1,000 most common word. This will pay off rapidly. The best way to learn vocabulary is with flashcards and spaced repetition. Watch our video on flashcards to get some pointer on how to use them most efficiently. We suggest you focus on phrases that use a vocab term rather than individual words. This is much more powerful both because it helps your memory to learn a word in context and because phrases can immediately be used in speaking and writing. Those cheap little phrase books really come in handy here. You might be surprised to find you already know many of the words in the new language. About 30% of English words are derived from French, 30% from Lan, and 30% from Germanic languages. This isn't going to help you very much if you are learning, say, Russian or Japanese. However, one interesting side benefit from learning such a different language is that you acquire new ways to express an idea. For instance, the Japanese term wabi-sabi refers to the beauty in imperfection. There's no denying, if you speak English, you can get by in many places. But to be a true citizen of the world, you want to be able to say bonjour, konnichiwa, hola, guten tag, bon dia. Being able to make yourself understood is an important part of being a great student. Ciao.